Chapter 1. Echo Division Disclaimer. This work of fiction incorporates real locations, documented folklore, archaeological discoveries, and reported natural phenomena associated with the Great Lakes region, including northern Michigan. Historical accounts, geological features, and publicly recorded events referenced in the opening sections have been adapted from real-world sources. All characters, organizations, interpretations, operational conclusions, and causal explanations are fictional. Any resemblance between documented phenomena and the narrative framework presented here is intentional. Echo Division neither confirms nor denies the existence of undisclosed systems, entities, or operations. Chapter 2. Classification Error. Sophia was halfway through a budget report when the door opened without knocking. Raegan walked in, like the room had already agreed to whatever she was about to say. She didn't speak. She just crossed the desk and threw down a folder. The file was old, thin, the kind that nobody wanted to touch long enough to properly close it. Then Raegan threw another. And another. 4 folders total, landing in an arc across Sophia's desk like accusations. "You need to look at this," Raegan said. Sophia didn't look up immediately. She set her pen down with deliberate care, letting the moment settle. Then she lifted her gaze to meet Raegan's. No anger, just assessment. When Sophia finally reached for the nearest folder, her movement was slow, controlled. She opened it without rushing, without commentary. Her eyes moved across the first page, then the second. Raegan watched. Something shifted in Sophia's expression. Not fear, not surprise, recognition. She closed the folder and looked up. "This isn't a monster," Sophia said. It wasn't a question. Raegan exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. "No," she agreed. "It's not." Sophia's gaze dropped back to the files, to the dates that spanned decades, to the locations that repeated, to the behavioral notes that never changed. "Get me everything," Sophia said quietly. "Every report, every account, every incident, classified or not. I want to see the pattern." Raegan nodded once and turned to leave. Sophia called her back with just a word. "Raegan!" She looked up. "How long has this been sitting in the system?" "Since 1887, Raegan replied. Sophia's jaw tightened. She looked down at the files spread across her desk. A century of evidence, all carefully documented, all studiously ignored. "Then we've got work to do," she said. Raegan left. Sophia sat alone in the quiet office, surrounded by folders full of reports that nobody had the nerve to either solve or admit they couldn't. She opened the first one again. And this time, she read like someone who understood that the most dangerous things weren't the ones that escalated, that they were the ones that endured. Chapter 3. The Line in the Snow, 1887. Wexford County, late November. The snow had come early that year. Not deep, not dramatic. Just enough to make the woods quieter than they had any right to be. Sound didn't carry the same way once the ground went white. Axes thudded dully. Breath fogged and vanished too quickly. Even the crows had gone elsewhere to be loud. Thomas Kincaid noticed the silence first. He stopped swinging mid-arc, the axe head hovering inches from the bark. The woods didn't echo the way they had 10 minutes ago. No wind through branches, no distant movement. Just a hollow stillness that made his ears ring. "You hear that?" he asked. Elias Morton didn't look up. "Hear what?" "That's the point." Elias finally paused, resting his weight on the axe handle. He listened, his brow creased. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, like the woods took a breath and forgot to let it out. They stood there longer than men working by daylight should have. The sensible thing would have been to call it. Mark the last trees, and head back before the light failed. But they were already behind schedule. Winter paid no mind to contracts, and the foreman had made that clear. Thomas glanced at the marks on the trees. Red paint. Fresh. Clear. "The line's here," he said. Elias nodded. "Just a few more. Then we're done." They stepped past the marked boundary. The sound came back all at once. Not wind. Not an animal. Something lower. A vibration that moved through the chest more than the ears. Thomas turned first. It stood just inside the tree line. Upright. That was the detail that stuck later, the one neither of them could quite reconcile. Wolves didn't stand like that. Bears didn't either. This thing balanced on two legs, with an ease that suggested it had never known another way. It was tall, taller than either of them, broad across the shoulders but not heavy. Its arms hung long at its sides, hands ending in shapes that could have been claws or fingers depending on how long you stared. The head was wrong. Canine, yes, but not like any dog Thomas had seen. The skull was longer, the jaw heavier, the eyes set forward instead of to the side. Predatory placement. Intelligent placement. Blue light reflected back at them, catching what little sun filtered through the trees. It did not advance. It did not growl. It simply watched. Elias took a step back without looking away. The thing mirrored him. One step. No more. Thomas swallowed. His throat felt tight, like he'd swallowed snow. "We should go," he whispered. Neither man ran. They backed away, slowly, boots crunching softly. When they crossed back over the painted line, the vibration faded. The woods exhaled. The figure stepped back into the trees and was gone. No chase, no sound, just absence. Later, when Thomas tried to explain it, he found himself saying the same thing over and over. "It didn't want us," he told the man writing it down. "It wanted us to leave." Chapter 4, Paris, Michigan, 1937. Paris, Michigan wasn't really a town so much as a pause. A handful of buildings, a general store, dirt roads that turned to mud every spring and dust every summer. If you blinked driving through, you missed it. Most people did. That was the point. Robert Fortney had lived there his entire life and expected to die there the same way most men did in rural Michigan in the 1930s. Quietly. Working too hard. Not being surprised by much, that expectation died on a Thursday afternoon. He was walking home from a neighbor's place just before dusk. The sky, low and gray. The kind that pressed down on the woods and made sound carry farther than it should. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the air smelled like it was thinking about it. That's when the dogs came out of the trees. 5 of them. Wild, lean, ribs showing. Not a pack he recognized, which bothered him more than the teeth. Dogs in those parts usually belonged to someone, even if no one admitted it. They spread out the moment they saw him. That part Robert understood. What he didn't understand was why one of them didn't lower its head. It stood, not rearing up, not lunging. Standing, the other circled, growled, snapped at the air. They moved like animals that hadn't eaten well in weeks. The upright one didn't move at all. Its head turned slightly, tracking Robert as he backed away. The eyes caught the fading light, reflecting amber instead of white. Its shoulders were too high. Its arms hung longer than a dog's should. Robert ran. The dogs chased him. The upright one walked. That detail mattered later, though he didn't know it at the time. He would tell anyone who asked that the others were animals, but that one was something else entirely. He reached the fence line just as his lungs began to burn. The dogs stopped. All four of them skidded to a halt like they'd hit a wall. The fifth one took a single step forward. Then it stopped too. It didn't cross the fence. It didn't snarl. It lifted its head and let out a sound Robert would later describe as a howl, though that wasn't quite right. It was lower, longer. It rolled through the trees instead of bouncing off them. Then it turned and walked back into the woods. The other dogs followed. Robert collapsed against the fence, shaking so badly he couldn't stand. When he told the sheriff what happened, the man listened politely and wrote it down carefully. Wild dogs weren't unusual. Fear made people see things. But when the sheriff walked the fence line the next day, he noticed something he couldn't explain. The grass on the far side was flattened in a straight line like something large had paced it, and not one paw print crossed over. Chapter 5, Cross Village, Michigan, 1967. By the 1960s, Michigan had changed. Highways cut through forests that once took days to cross. Electricity reached places lanterns used to rule. People thought they understood the land now. Cross Village sat high on a bluff, overlooking Lake Michigan, north of Harbor Springs. Tourists came for the view. Locals stayed because leaving felt like a kind of betrayal. On a clear afternoon in late summer, 3 people saw it. That was the problem. Not one witness, not 2. 3. They were standing near the tree line, arguing about where to park for the best view of the lake, when the woods went quiet. Not suddenly, gradually, like someone turning a dial. The figure stepped out between the trees in full daylight. It didn't hide. It didn't rush. It stood there tall and still, outlined against the green like it belonged. One of the men laughed nervously. "That's a man in a costume." The howl answered him. It wasn't loud enough to hurt. It wasn't close enough to feel. But it carried. The sound rolled out across the bluff and down toward the water, long and steady, like a foghorn meant for something far away. The figure didn't move while it called. When it finished, it took one step back, then another, and vanished into the trees. None of the witnesses ran. None of them spoke for several minutes. Later, they all said the same thing in separate interviews. And they never felt threatened. They felt noticed. Chapter 6, Northern Michigan, on the radio, 1987. In 1987, a radio DJ in Traverse City thought it would be funny to write a song. It was April Fool's Day. Local legends were harmless. No one took them seriously anymore. The song was called The Legend. It talked about a creature that appeared every 10 years. Half man, half dog, roaming the woods of northern Michigan. People laughed, and the phone lines lit up. Not prank calls, not jokes. People calling in with stories they'd never told anyone before. Sightings, sounds, moments in the woods that never made sense. Until now. The sightings didn't increase. The reporting did. That distinction mattered. The creature didn't change its behavior. Humans changed theirs. For the first time, the watcher was being named. And names, as history showed again and again, had a way of drawing attention where attention was not welcome. Chapter 7, Manistee County, 2019. The man hiking the trail had his phone out because everyone did by then. Photos of trees, of the lake, of nothing in particular. That's why the footage mattered. The figure appeared at the edge of the frame, partially obscured by branches. Tall, upright, still. It didn't approach. It didn't retreat. It waited. When the hiker backed away, the figure stepped back too. Always the same distance. Always the same rule. The video cut off when the man's hands started shaking too badly to hold the phone steady. When investigators reviewed the footage frame by frame, they noticed something subtle. The creature adjusted its position to stay visible. Not closer, just seen. Chapter 8. When the water wasn't there. Grand Traverse Bay did not exist when the stones were placed. That was the first thing Sofia insisted everyone understand, because without that fact, nothing else made sense. Lake Michigan, as the world now knew it, was young by geological standards. 10,000 years ago, the waterline sat far lower. What was now a vast inland sea had once been rolling land, cut by meltwater rivers and animal trails worn deep into the earth by repetition. Caribou had moved through here in numbers modern people couldn't imagine. Mastodons followed, humans followed them both. And somewhere along that migration corridor, someone stopped and built something that did not move. The sonar image resolved slowly on the screen, each pass filling in more detail. Long, straight alignments of stone stretched across the bay floor, disappearing into the murk where the scan range ended. Natural formations don't do this, Raegan said quietly. No, Sofia agreed. They collapse. They scatter. They curve. She pointed at the display. This is deliberate linearity. Someone drew a line and meant it to stay drawn. The stones varied in size but not in intent. Each one had been selected, not gathered at random. Dense rock, low porosity, resistant to erosion. Heavy enough to stay put even after thousands of years of wave action and ice movement. This wasn't symbolic, Sofia said. It was functional. The boat rocked gently above them, the surface of the bay calm and indifferent. It was difficult, standing there, to reconcile the peaceful water with the idea that it concealed something built when the climate itself was in flux. They planned for submersion, Raegan said. That's the part that bothers me. Sofia nodded. It should. Whoever built this had known the water was coming. Not guessed. Not hoped. Knew. The Mastodon Stone. The carving was subtle. That was what made it dangerous. It wasn't stylized or decorative. It wasn't deep or dramatic. It was a simple outline etched into the surface of one stone, worn smooth by time but still unmistakable. A sloping back. Curved tusks. A trunk suggested with minimal lines. A mastodon. That single detail collapsed timelines people were comfortable with. Mastodons had gone extinct at the end of the last ice age. If the carving was authentic, it meant the stones were placed before agriculture, before metal tools, before written language in the region, before Lake Michigan existed. This predates everything we like to call civilization, Raegan said. It predates everything we like to take credit for, Sofia corrected. The implication was unavoidable. Whoever built this understood. Those were not the skills of wandering hunters, improvising shelter. Those were the skills of engineers. Why it isn't a temple. Temples leave evidence. Broken tools, hearths, burials, offerings, trash. This site had none of it. No central altar, no focal point, no signs of repeated human presence, just stone, placed, aligned, left alone. People don't worship places they never return to, Sofia said, and they don't build ceremonial structures a mile long. She overlaid the stone alignment with reconstructed land maps from the late Pleistocene. The line intersected. The Michigan Basin was a massive, bowl-shaped geological structure underlying the lower peninsula. Layers of sediment dipped inward toward its center, creating zones where pressure redistributed over time. The stones sat at the edge of one such zone, not at the center, at the boundary. Edge reinforcement, Sofia murmured. Raegan glanced at her. Say that again. If you're stabilizing something, Sofia said, you don't anchor the middle first. You secure the perimeter. Indigenous silence.
The Anishinaabe oral traditions referenced the water here, but never in detail. There were stories of,
But no maps, no precise descriptions, no instructions. That absence was intentional. Sofia had seen this before in other cultures. When knowledge is dangerous if misunderstood, it is fragmented, rules are passed on, explanations are not. You don't tell people how the engine works, Raegan said, yet you tell them not to touch it. Exactly, Sofia replied. The stories spoke of guardians, not gods, of consequences, not morality, of respect enforced by the environment itself. No hero myths, no triumphs, just boundaries. What the stones actually do. Sofia didn't say it out loud at first. She let the idea sit with her, turning it over from every angle, testing it against everything she knew about the dogman, the sightings, and the anomalies further inland. Finally, she spoke. These stones aren't containing something explosive, she said. They're redistributing stress. Raegan frowned. Stress from what? Sofia gestured broadly, encompassing the bay, the land beyond it, and the invisible structures beneath. From the basin, from whatever shifts when water levels rise and fall, from something that doesn't like sudden change. She pulled up the Gravity Hill data again, though they hadn't gone there yet. You don't see cracks where the system is strong, she continued. You see them where the load concentrates. The stones weren't a lock. They were a brace. And braces fail slowly, long before they break. The uncomfortable connection. Sofia leaned back against the rail and looked out at the water. People think ancient structures are about belief, she said. They're wrong. Belief doesn't move stone like this. Raegan followed her gaze. So what does? Fear, Sofia said, and responsibility. Whoever built the alignment had known something was coming. Not an invasion, not a monster. Change. Ice retreating, water rising, land shifting under pressure. They built a system to survive it. They built guardians to enforce its boundaries. And then they left, or died, or became stories people no longer fully understood. Sofia felt the weight of time pressed down on her in a way combat never had. This wasn't a war, it was inheritance. And now, after thousands of years, the system was still working. Barely. Chapter 9. Gravity Hill is not a trick. Rose City, Michigan sits in the kind of country people underestimate. Rolling forest, narrow roads, glacial leftovers softened by time and trees. If you weren't looking for it, you'd assume nothing strange ever happened there, beyond getting lost after dark. Gravity Hill sat just outside town, on a stretch of road locals liked to bring visitors to when they wanted a laugh. You stop at the bottom. You put the car in neutral. It rolls uphill. Everyone laughed the first time they saw it. Sofia did not. She stood at the roadside with Raegan and two members of Echo Division's field team as the late afternoon light filtered through the trees. The hill looked ordinary. Too ordinary. That's the problem, Sofia said. The road sloped downward. Every visual cue agreed. The trees leaned the way trees lean. The horizon sat where it should. Even experience told you the road dipped. Raegan eased the vehicle to a stop at the marked point and shifted into neutral. The car began to move. Not fast, not suddenly, just decisively. Uphill. The engine wasn't running, the brakes weren't dragging, the movement was smooth, controlled, and wrong. One of the technicians swore under his breath. That never stops being uncomfortable, Anit, Raegan said. Sofia didn't answer. She was watching the instruments. Accelerometers showed conflicting readings. One axis insisted gravity was pulling the car downhill. Another disagreed by just enough to matter. Gyroscopic sensors drifted slowly, then corrected themselves, as if embarrassed. Timestamps from synchronized devices desynced by fractions of a second as the vehicle crossed an invisible point on the road. Not enough for anyone to notice casually. Enough for Sofia to feel her stomach tighten. "This isn't an illusion," she said. "Illusions don't argue with math." She stepped out of the car and crouched, placing her palm flat on the asphalt. The road was cold, solid, unremarkable, and nothing vibrated, nothing hummed, no magical theatrics, no obvious source. And yet, when she stood, her inner ear told her she wasn't quite level. "This isn't gravity reversing," Sofia said in a touch. "That would be catastrophic." Raegan folded her arms. "Then what is it?" Sofia straightened slowly. "It's reference frames disagreeing," she said. "The environment can't decide what down is for a moment." The technicians exchanged looks. "That's not possible," one of them said automatically. Sofia glanced at him. "And yet, what the hill teaches you." Gravity Hill only works in a narrow band. A few dozen yards of road. A specific alignment. A specific elevation. Step outside it, and the world behaves again. "That's the key," Sofia said. "If this were geological, it would be broader. If it were magnetic, it would be measurable." She pulled up maps and overlaid them. Topography. Subsurface composition. Glacial moraine paths. Michigan Basin stress contours. The hill sat directly over a minor stress node in the basin. Not a fault, not a break. A pressure point. Like a beam carrying weight it was never designed to carry forever. "This is a symptom," Sofia said, "not a cause." Raegan looked back at the road. "Symptom of what?" Sofia didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about the stones under the bay, about how they redistributed load rather than containing something outright, about how the dogman appeared when boundaries were crossed. "This is what happens when an old system compensates," she said finally. "Not perfectly, just enough. Why people can laugh at it. The human brain hates uncertainty. If something doesn't hurt you, doesn't threaten you, and doesn't escalate, people file it under quirk and move on." Tourists laughed, locals shrugged, scientists proposed optical illusions, and walked away when the data got uncomfortable. No one panicked, which meant no one fixed anything. "That's why it's still working," Raegan said quietly. "Nobody's paying attention." Sofia nodded. "Systems like this survive because they're boring," she said. "The moment they become dramatic, it's already too late." The line reappears. Sofia walked the length of the road slowly, counting steps, marking invisible boundaries in her mind. There, right there. The same sensation she'd felt reading the Dogman reports. The same subtle pressure shift as the fence line in Paris, Michigan. The same invisible wall the lumberjacks crossed in 1887. She stopped. "This is another boundary," she said. Raegan frowned. "A guard post?" "A warning sign," Sofia replied. "One that doesn't need a creature to enforce it. Just physics misbehaving enough to make people pause." Raegan exhaled slowly. "So the woods get the dogman, the water gets the stones, and the land," Sofia said, "gets this. Tiein without spelling it out." Sofia stood at the crest of the hill and looked north. Toward the forests, toward the bay, toward the ancient routes carved by animals long extinct. The pattern was complete now. different tools, same purpose, and none of them were failing. Catastrophically? Yet, Sofia felt a familiar, unwelcome certainty settle in her chest. Whatever had been built here was not meant to last forever. It was meant to last long enough, and long enough was coming to an end. Chapter 10. What was built here? Sofia did not announce her conclusion. She didn't call a meeting with dramatic lighting or slide decks full of red circles. She waited until the room was quiet, until the coffee had gone cold, until everyone present had read the same reports often enough that the words stopped being interesting and started being heavy. That was when people listened. Maps covered the table, not one map, many. Topographic maps of northern Michigan, pre-glacial reconstructions, lake-level models spanning 10,000 years, logging permits, dredging zones, shoreline development plans, dogman sightings, plotted as points rather than stories, the stone alignment beneath Grand Traverse Bay, Gravity Hill's narrow, stubborn anomaly. Taken alone, each map told a harmless story. Together, they told the same story over and over again. This is not folklore, Sofia said at last. It's infrastructure. No one interrupted her. She tapped the oldest layer first. When the glaciers retreated, this land was unstable. Not catastrophically, gradually. Pressure redistributed as ice vanished, water moved in, and the Michigan Basin settled into the shape it still holds today. She moved her finger along ancient migration routes. Large animals moved through here because the land allowed it. Humans followed because the animals did. And somewhere along that corridor, people encountered a problem they couldn't outrun. Raegan leaned forward. You're saying they found something? Sofia nodded once. Or something found them. The distinction doesn't matter anymore. She pointed to the underwater alignment. The stones were placed where stress concentrates, not where it explodes. They don't seal, they brace, they spread load across a system that was never meant to absorb rapid change. Someone swallowed audibly. They planned for water rise, Sofia continued. For climate shift, for time. That alone puts this beyond survival instinct. She moved to the dogman sightings. This, she said, tapping the forested regions, is enforcement. No one argued. The behavior never changes. It doesn't hunt. It doesn't defend territory in the animal sense. It responds when boundaries are crossed. It withdraws when compliance is restored. She paused. It doesn't punish. It corrects. The room was silent. Sofia shifted to the Gravity Hill data. And this is what happens when enforcement isn't enough, she said. When physical anchors age. When stress leaks upward into places humans notice. She looked around the table. Gravity Hill isn't a warning meant for us. It's a symptom. The system compensating imperfectly. Raegan finally spoke. So what is it all holding together? Sofia didn't answer immediately. She didn't know, and she wasn't going to pretend otherwise. That's the part we don't have, she said. And that's intentional. She gestured to the indigenous accounts again. They didn't forget. They chose not to preserve specifics, because systems like this don't fail because of ignorance. They fail because of confident idiots trying to improve them. A few people nodded grimly. Sofia straightened. What matters is this, she said. Whatever was built here was never meant to be worshipped, conquered, or exploited. It was meant to persist quietly while the land changed around it. She looked at the most recent development overlays. And we are very good at stressing quiet systems. Raegan exhaled slowly. So what's our role? Sofia met her gaze. We're not here to fight it. We're not here to expose it, and we're definitely not here to solve it. She let that sink in. We're here to keep it from breaking. Someone at the far end of the table asked the question everyone else was avoiding. What happens if it does? Sophia thought of the dogmen stepping back when people complied, of the stones holding underwater for 9,000 years, of gravity bending just enough to be noticed. I don't think it fails all at once, she said. I think it fails locally, incrementally, and every failure forces the system to compensate harder somewhere else. She closed the last file. And eventually, she added quietly, compensation becomes escalation. No one spoke after that. Outside, northern Michigan went about its business. Trees swayed, water shifted, roads carried traffic. Gravity behaved itself again. For now. Sophia gathered the files into a single stack. This isn't a monster case, she said. It's a maintenance problem with no manual and a warranty that expired before writing was invented. Raegan gave a thin, humorless smile. So what do we do first? Sophia looked at the map one last time, at the places where lines converged and stress accumulated. We stopped making it worse, she said. And for the first time since the case began, that answer scared her more than any monster ever had. Chapter 11. Echo Division, Northern Michigan. Northern Michigan is not defined by a single legend. There is no one story, no single event, no moment where everything becomes clear. What exists, instead, is a record, a pattern of reports spanning more than a century, locations that repeat, behaviors that remain consistent, phenomena that do not escalate, but also do not disappear, upright figures in the forest that enforce boundaries without violence, stone alignments placed before the Great Lakes reached their current form, roads where gravity behaves differently, but only in specific places. Each of these can be dismissed on its own. Together, they are harder to ignore. Everything presented here is drawn from real locations, documented accounts, archaeological discoveries, and publicly recorded natural phenomena. No conclusions are offered. The question is not whether these things are real. The question is why they behave the way they do, and why they appear to be connected. That analysis belongs to Echo Division. And it comes next. All locations and reported phenomena referenced in this presentation exist in the real world. Interpretation is withheld.
Don't forget to hit that like button.
And subscribe to stay updated.
We appreciate the support.